but trying to study Portuguese, you know, it'd be really nice if English had this nasal vowel stuff because it'd probably be easier to learn. Yeah, it's too bad English doesn't have nasal vowels. Or does it? Hi, I'm Josh, your American English guide, and this is English Hacks Pronunciation, where I help you to sound like a native if you want, and to understand real, natural American speech better. Now, English is not a particularly nasal language. In fact, if you're too nasally in your speech, it will sound annoying to most people. And unlike languages like Portuguese, which make a difference between, for example, o and on, English doesn't really do that. However, there's a little trick here. Any vowel sound before n, or is, or at least can be, partially nasalized. What does that mean? Well, the first thing is that it doesn't mean that we have a difference in meaning between, say, o and on. Those are not two different sounds, but when you are preparing to go into an M, an N, or the back end, the NG, the nasal flap in the back, the velum, will tend to loosen up a bit and allow a bit more of that vowel sound to go through the nose. Now, I say partially nasalized because with some exceptions, it's usually not a full-on nasal sound. And we're going to look at some examples here. But before that, there's one more important point. Notice that I said vowels are or can be partially nasalized. Natives do commonly partially nasalize the vowel before these nasal consonant sounds. It allows us to speak a little bit more easily because we're already in a better position to flow smoothly into that nasal consonant sound. If your goal is to sound as native-like as possible, I do strongly recommend that you try to develop and use this. But if your goal is just to sound really clear and better, you definitely do not have to do this at all. And if you do speak a language like Portuguese or French, or maybe some Asian language that might have just a generally more nasal sound, you want to be very careful that you don't fully nasalize and overdo this because it will stand out and it will sound a little strange. Let's go ahead and take a look at some examples as well as a special case where you can drop N. First, the basics. All right, we have the word C. If you listen to the vowel sound, it's going to sound like it's coming through the mouth. E, C, C. Okay, there's very little, if any, going through the nose. I'm not nasalizing. I'm not trying to nasalize at all. Now, what happens if there's an N after it? Seen, seen. Okay, let me compare these side by side. See, seen, see, seen. Now, it might be a little difficult to hear, especially with E. Some of these vowels, the partial nasality doesn't stand out very much. But notice that I'm not fully nasalizing it. If I were to do that, it would be like seen, seen. That's like completely in my nose. Okay, you do not want to do that. Okay, that's going to make you harder to understand. That's going to probably make you sound kind of annoying. So if you're going to do this, you want to make sure it's controlled. It's just a little nasal because we're just relaxing that velum, that back flap, in preparation to go into that nasal consonant sound. So if we put an M after it, seem. So again, C and seem. See, seem, see, seem. Now, we are going to look also at an example with The example here will be sing. Now, a clarification for those of you who don't know, I've talked about this before. When you have ing, you can use the vowel E or you can use the vowel I. It's usually taught as I, but if you say sing or sing, they sound so similar that it does not matter. So if it's easier for you to use the E vowel before go ahead and do that. That's what I'm going to do in this case because that's how I naturally speak. But let's see if we keep that E and we go into sing, sing. You can start to hear that sing, right? Let's look at another example using ah. So we have la, lawn, lom, as in llama, and long. Okay, so I don't know if you already noticed it just from that, but if I just say la with no nasal consonant, la, put in that n after it, see right there, instead of it's the same sound, same position. I'm just letting a little more go through the nose. On, lawn. So again with llama, llama, llama. Yeah, just a little bit nasal. Or long, long. Okay, so those are the basics, but there's a special thing that we want to talk about here, which are cases where you can drop the N sound. This is a very, very special little trick that we can do when we partially nasalize vowels, where you can actually not pronounce the N at all. And the reason why is because, for example, if I say don't, let's say I fully enunciate that word, I tried to make sure there's no nasality in the O, don't, okay? So d, o, n, t. Sounds okay. And if we are really emphasizing, really enunciating, it might actually come out that way with no nasalization of the vowel. However, number one, you would partially nasalize the O, and that's the first step. You can keep the N, you can keep the T. There's a whole range of pronunciation for this word. So you can say, instead of don't, and keeping the O through the mouth, you nasalize that O partially. Don't, okay. O, just a little nasal. Don't. I still go into the N, I still push out the T. Now we'll commonly stop the T, don't. Now, can I do a partial nasal O, not close into N, and then not close into T? Because remember, the T can just be stopped with the glottis, and we'll recognize it as a stopped T. So you can actually do this. You could do D, nasal O, partial nasal O, and then glottal stop. And it will sound like don't, as if there's an N there, even though we're not physically producing an N sound. And we can hear the N through the O with the partial nasalization. It's a little trick we have. Again, do not overdo this. Do not say don't. If you over nasalize it, it's not going to sound good. It's going to sound maybe really French. It's just a little bit of nasalization to where it's not O, it's all, very light. Now this is actually part of a bigger pattern that we can categorize as vowel plus NT. In the past, we've talked about the NT plus vowel rule, where, say, if we say want and it, you can drop the T, the N will link to the vowel, and we say wa-nit. The vowel plus NT rule is completely different. It has nothing to do with that. Okay, just because we have a vowel and an NT, the order is different. Vowel plus NT is a pattern where we can always drop the N. Now you can push out the T as a T, you can glottalize it and do a glottal stop. Either way is fine, but the N never has to be physically produced as long as you partially nasalize the vowel. So in addition to the word don't, this will also work, for example, in, of course, won't, or can't, can't, can't. Okay, again, that's one of the reasons why sounds different before an N. It's that nasalization, partial nasalization. By the way, that's also one of the secrets to hearing and producing the difference between can and can't. Very minor partial nasalization in the positive, can. And then in the negative, we tend to maybe let it just be a little bit more nasally, and then we'll cut off that T, so you have to hear the cutoff. If you don't hear a cutoff, there's no T there, and it's probably going to be positive. So between the extra nasal and the cutoff, that usually makes the negative very clear to natives. Can't. But there are other words that also do this as well. Paint. Again, fully enunciated, paint. You can choose to push out the T, not push out the T. It's always possible to go into the N. That can happen, but you don't have to with that partially nasalized vowel. Front instead of front. 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 Rent instead of rent. 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 Did you paint the house? Did you paint the house? Yeah, he's in the front. He's in the front. Did you pay the rent? Did you pay the rent? Now this doesn't just work with the vowel plus NT, this also just works with a regular N. So for example, you can say instead of confuse, drop the N, make the it's spelled with an O, but it's an make the partially nasal, and then just go straight into the F. Confuse. That is a very normal, natural, native way to pronounce it. Now you can still throw that N in there, that's part of the range, that's the fully enunciated version, but as long as your vowel is partially nasalized, you don't have to actually do that. And if you listen closely, you'll hear natives drop that N all the time because it sounds like it's there in the vowel. Another example, invite. See, at no point did I close, not in possible. And so you can hear it going still all the way into that V, and then I'll switch into the V. Invite. What about answer? Answer. So if I fully enunciate this, I'm going to close into that N position, which is the same as T and D. Because we have an S after it, this helps create the TS illusion that I talked about before. Answer. Just like if I say what's. Okay, there's no actual T there. Because N is in the same place, we'll get the same type of sound, like there's a TS, but there is no T. Answer. That's one way to say it. That's perfectly fine. Or you can partially nasalize the A. Don't pronounce an N at all. As you close up, don't go into N, just go into the S instead. Ans. Now you can even do this between words. I've been thinking. Instead of saying been thinking, I can say been nasal I. Remember, it's not E, it's spelled like E, but it's I in American English. I. Been. You can nasalize the I and not actually go into the N. I've been thinking, been thinking. How about when saying something important, blah, 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 blah. Okay, when saying. Now here, because we have N and S like we talked about before, we can get that TS illusion when saying, when saying, when and there's that sort of TS illusion sound. Or partially nasalize the vowel in when, which fully enunciated when is when, it's but it can reduce to I. So you can either do a nasalized or a nasalized doesn't matter. We're probably going to use most of the time. And then you just go straight into the S without doing the N, which means that that TS illusion will also disappear. When saying something. Did you guys know that natives do this? So some of you might have some difficulty with this. If you have any questions on how to produce this, or when maybe you can use it in this case, maybe you can use it in that case, any questions you have, please let me know. I can answer those for you. In the meantime, check out another lesson. Thank you guys so much for watching this lesson from English Hacks, and I'll see you in the next one.